I used your money to build my lover's business, Jordan. Those were the exact words Clarissa Reeves whispered to her husband in their Dallas penthouse, calm, deliberate, and merciless. Her voice didn't tremble. Her smile didn't flinch. She thought she'd finally broken the man who built her world. But the stillness in Jordan's eyes wasn't shock, it was strategy. He didn't shout. He didn't strike. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and said, "Then I guess we're both about to learn what real investment returns look like." From that moment, love turned into calculation. Because while Clarissa flaunted her affair and paraded her lover's success, Jordan began orchestrating a revenge so subtle it felt like kindness. He sent her flowers, smiled through dinners, even posed for the cameras at a gala announcing her lover's company's historic merger, unaware that the papers she was celebrating were the same documents signing her dreams away. At the Carter Grand Hotel, beneath glittering chandeliers, Jordan raised a glass and spoke to the crowd. "Tonight we celebrate partnership and the wisdom betrayal teaches." Then the lights shifted and the screens came alive, revealing every secret transfer, every message, every lie she thought deleted. The ballroom froze. Her lover went pale. And when the final slide read Cole Maritime Holdings, a subsidiary of Reeves Link Logistics, Clarissa realized she hadn't humiliated her husband, she'd handed him her lover's empire. Weeks later, the courtroom became her execution ground. The same man she once mocked for being too kind watched in silence as her emails, her fake accounts, and her DNA reports shattered every defense. When the verdict came, it was swift. She lost her children, her fortune, her reputation, everything. Her lover went bankrupt. Justice didn't roar that day. It whispered. Months later, Jordan Reeves stood alone on his balcony overlooking Dallas. Not smiling, not triumphant, just quiet. Revenge hadn't healed him, but it had restored something priceless. Truth. He learned that sometimes the kindest men become the most dangerous enemies, not because they fight with anger, but because they fight with patience. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a blade under your ribs? Would you forgive, or would you teach them what silence can do? If you are just new here, please kindly subscribe and turn on the notification for more interesting stories like this. Now, grab your popcorn and let's dive into the story in full. I used your money to build my lover's business. Those were the words that shattered 12 years of marriage, spoken so calmly, so deliberately, that the air in the Reeves living room turned into glass. Clarissa stood by the marble counter, her chin lifted, her voice steady, her eyes glazed with a confidence that shouldn't belong to a woman confessing treason. Sunlight filtered through the tall Dallas windows, slicing her reflection across the silver refrigerator. She didn't look sorry. She looked proud. Across from her, Jordan Reeves didn't move. He sat in his tailored navy suit, his laptop still open beside his untouched cup of coffee. His jaw tightened, but his eyes, those dark, thoughtful eyes, remained fixed on her. Years of boardroom composure had trained him to listen before reacting. But this wasn't a business negotiation. This was the wreckage of his life being delivered like a quarterly report. "Say that again," he said quietly. Clarissa smirked. "You heard me. The money you invested, the one you thought went to the Green Line expansion, it went to Damien, my lover. His logistics company is alive because of you." She waited for the explosion, for the man she married to scream, to break, to call her the monster she had become. But Jordan's silence unnerved her more than any rage could. He just blinked, slow and cold, the way a predator studies movement before the strike. "Why?" he asked finally, the word barely audible. She exhaled, shaking her head as if she were the victim. "Because he believes in me. He lets me dream. You just plan. You think kindness and discipline can build empires, but I built something better, freedom." Her words echoed, arrogant and rehearsed. Jordan stared at the floor. Somewhere behind that stillness was memory. Clarissa's laughter at their wedding, her hand over his while signing their first mortgage, the late nights she said she was visiting her mother. He had believed her. He had believed everything. You built his business, Jordan murmured, his voice low, measured, almost too calm. With my name, my credit, my trust. He looked up, eyes glinting beneath the morning light. Do the children know? The question cut her composure like glass. For a moment, her confidence trembled. Then she forced a smile. Don't twist this. You've always been too controlling. I just wanted something that was mine. But the calm in his voice unsettled her now. Because Jordan wasn't angry, he was thinking. He rose, straightened his cufflinks, and said softly, You just gave me the most valuable business lesson of my life. Clarissa frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He looked at her, and for the first time, smiled. Not with warmth, but with the quiet precision of a man who had just discovered his next move. Then he turned, walked out, and left her standing in the house she had just destroyed. And as the door clicked shut, Clarissa realized too late he hadn't lost control. He had just begun. Long before those 6 words, I used your money to build my lover's business, Clarissa Reeves had been the center of Jordan's world. They met 13 years ago at a business seminar in downtown Austin. She was a marketing consultant, bright-eyed and eloquent, with a smile that made rooms listen. He was a self-made entrepreneur in the early stages of launching his first tech startup, Reeves Link Logistics. Clarissa wasn't like anyone Jordan had met. She wasn't impressed by his ambition. She was drawn to his calmness and his depth. You make chaos sound like strategy, she'd once told him. That night, he'd walked her home in the rain, lending her his jacket, a moment she would later replay to justify every manipulation that followed. Their marriage began in kindness. Jordan built their first home with his own savings, choosing every detail himself. When business boomed, he opened a joint account, saying, Our success should have your name on it too. He believed in partnership. Clarissa believed in access. For years, everything looked perfect. She threw elegant charity dinners, played the role of the devoted wife, and smiled for magazine covers. To friends, they were the ideal Dallas couple, wealthy, charitable, and inseparable. But cracks had started forming long before Jordan noticed. It began with a client, Damian Cole, a rival logistics CEO who flirted as easily as he lied. Jordan once admired the man's business instincts. He didn't realize he was inviting a viper into his home. Clarissa had met Damian during a gala that Jordan himself sponsored. That night, Damian's hand lingered too long when he congratulated her on her grace under pressure. She laughed it off. Jordan didn't. He had felt something, a small, quiet chill, but brushed it away. He'd always believed in giving people the benefit of doubt. That was his first mistake. Now, standing in the wreckage of that trust, those memories replayed in his mind like film scenes he wished he could unsee. Eleanor Grant, his CFO and oldest friend, had once warned him, You're generous to a fault, Jordan. Not everyone who smiles is loyal. He had laughed then. Kindness isn't weakness, Ellie. It's clarity. But kindness, he was, realizing now, had built the very bridge Clarissa used to betray him. Every gesture of trust had become a weapon. Every dollar he'd shared had become ammunition for her lover's success. As he drove that night alone, silent, the city lights blurred like streaks of betrayal through the windshield. His phone buzzed. Eleanor again. Jordan, I checked the Green Line transfers, she said. There's a pattern. Someone's been moving funds through offshore accounts. Same routing code, tied to a company registered under Damian Cole's name. Jordan closed his eyes, steadying his breath. Don't alert anyone yet, he said. Not even legal. Just trace everything quietly. There was no anger in his tone, only a terrifying calm. Because for the first time, Jordan Reeves wasn't trying to fix things. He was planning, and beneath that still surface, revenge had just found its architect. By Monday morning, Jordan Reeves had become 2 men, the husband everyone saw, and the one silently dissecting the ruins of his own life. He sat in his corner office at Reeves Link Logistics, the Dallas skyline gleaming beyond the glass walls. His employees moved through the floor with practiced smiles, unaware that their CEO's world had just cracked open. He'd been in finance long enough to know that betrayal leaves digital fingerprints. All he had to do was follow the numbers. Eleanor stepped in quietly, holding a folder. "You said keep it between us," she murmured, sliding it across his desk. "These are the wire transfers, 4 major ones, each from your joint account marked as vendor development funds. But here's the twist. The receiver company doesn't exist, at least not publicly." Jordan opened the folder, flipping through printouts. Dates, amounts, routing codes, over $2.4 million moved in 8 months. "And you traced where it ended?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes. Shell company registered under Cole Maritime Holdings. Guess who the listed COO is?" He didn't answer. He already knew. Clarissa, a slow exhale left his chest not of shock, but of certainty. The pieces fit too neatly. She hadn't stumbled into deceit. She'd engineered it. Eleanor studied him. "Jordan, I can pull in forensic accountants. You don't have to go through this alone." He shook his head. "No. The moment we make noise, she'll know. Let's keep it silent. I want to see how far this web goes." When Eleanor left, Jordan leaned back and stared at the city, the very empire he'd built, now funding his rival. His reflection ghosted across the window. The tailored suit, the calm expression, but eyes colder than the glass that framed them. That evening, he returned home early. Clarissa was in the living room, on a video call, her laughter bright and polished. She looked up, startled when she saw him standing there. "You're home early," she said, closing her laptop too quickly. "I missed you," he said smoothly, kissing her forehead. "I thought we could have dinner together." She blinked, confused. Jordan's calm terrified her more than any suspicion would have. She poured him a glass of wine, watching him over the rim of her glass. "You've been distant," she said. "Everything okay at work?" Jordan smiled faintly. "Better than ever. Just going over our joint investments." Something flickered in her eyes, panic, brief and sharp, but she recovered fast. "Oh, you mean Greenline?" He tilted his head, as though searching her expression for an echo of truth. "Yes, Greenline." Later that night, after she fell asleep, he walked into his study and called Marcus Delgado, a former police detective turned private investigator. "Marcus, I need a discrete background on Damian Cole," Jordan said. "Every company, every asset, and every personal connection." "And Marcus?" "Yes, sir." "Find out who my children belong to." Silence. Then, the quiet reply. "Understood." As he hung up, Jordan closed his eyes. Outside, the night pressed heavy against the windows, and for the first time, the man who built empires decided to destroy one. 3 weeks later, the truth arrived in a plain brown envelope. Jordan sat alone in his study, the soft hum of the air conditioning the only sound in the silence. His desk was littered with files, offshore records, email screenshots, and financial printouts. But this envelope, this one, was personal. Marcus Delgado's name was printed in neat black letters on the corner. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. When he finally did, the world folded in on itself. 2 DNA reports, 2 children, neither was his. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He simply lowered his head into his hands, and for the first time since that morning in the kitchen, his breath came uneven. The pain wasn't cinematic, it was quiet, sharp, the kind that rewrites how a man sees himself. He remembered Ava's giggle when she'd built cardboard rockets in his office. Mason's tiny hands gripping his tie every morning. "Daddy, fly me like a plane." They weren't just memories now, they were ghosts with living faces. Marcus's voice echoed faintly in his head from their earlier call. "I've got what you asked for," the investigator had said softly. "Damian's company is bleeding cash. Clarissa's been transferring funds in small amounts for over a year. But there's more, Jordan. They've been meeting every Thursday at the Lakeview Apartments, Unit 4C. That was the night Clarissa claimed she volunteered at a children's foundation. He'd even donated to that foundation $50,000 under her name. The irony felt surgical. When the clock struck midnight, he rose from his chair and poured himself a glass of whiskey. The amber light refracted through the crystal tumbler, bouncing off the room's mahogany panels. It looked almost beautiful, like deception, hiding in plain sight. He walked toward the window overlooking Dallas. Down below, the city pulsed with life, unaware that one of its most respected men had just lost everything that made him human. His phone vibrated. A message from Clarissa. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." He stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back a single word. "Okay." He set the phone down gently, as if it were a fragile lie that might break if handled roughly. Then, for the first time, he spoke aloud to the empty room, to himself, to the ghost of the man he used to be. "Kindness made me blind, but blindness ends tonight." He looked at the family photo on his desk, Clarissa smiling, Ava and Mason hugging his neck. He reached out and turned the frame face down. Outside, lightning flickered across the skyline, and the rain began to fall in thin, deliberate sheets, the kind that cleanses, not comforts. Jordan Reeves didn't sleep that night. He planned, quietly, efficiently, like a man preparing to bury the past and everyone who profited from it. The morning after the storm, Jordan Reeves woke with the kind of focus that only devastation can sharpen. He didn't rage, he didn't collapse. He went to work. By 8 a.m., he was in his office, sleeves rolled up, reviewing the corporate architecture of Reeves Link Logistics. His board trusted him implicitly, and that trust became his greatest weapon. What Clarissa and Damien had stolen wasn't just money, it was arrogance, assuming his kindness would keep him blind. They were wrong. He called Eleanor Grant. "We're restructuring," he said, quietly. "Every joint asset, every partner firm, every subsidiary, I want a new audit protocol under my private authorization only. Label it cyber risk evaluation." No one asked questions. Eleanor frowned slightly. "Is this about Clarissa?" Jordan's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "It's about loyalty." Over the next few weeks, Jordan worked like a man possessed. He formed 3 shell corporations under different jurisdictions, each fronted by silent partners loyal to him. Through these, he began buying minority stakes in Damien Cole's company, Cole Maritime Holdings, small enough to stay unnoticed, but strategic enough to give him leverage when the time came. At night, he rehearsed civility. Clarissa didn't suspect a thing. She still kissed him goodbye, still smiled over dinner, still pretended their marriage was intact. Sometimes Jordan caught her watching him carefully, waiting for anger, expecting confrontation. But none came. That was his advantage. He let her believe she'd won. He began sending flowers to her office again, texting her during the day, even booking a surprise weekend getaway to Santa Fe. To Clarissa, it looked like guilt, a man trying to fix what she had already broken. To Jordan, it was camouflage. During that weekend trip, while Clarissa slept in their hotel suite, he logged into her laptop. She'd reused one of his old passwords. Within minutes, he had full access to her encrypted folders, containing messages to Damien and transaction histories she thought deleted. It was all there. Their plans to merge her husband's assets with Damien's company, to phase Jordan out slowly. When Clarissa stirred awake, Jordan smiled. "Go back to sleep," he whispered. "We have an early flight." By morning, he'd uploaded everything to a secure drive. The evidence wasn't just proof of betrayal, it was a blueprint of their destruction. Back in Dallas, he made his first strategic move. Using his proxy companies, Jordan acquired Damien's loan contracts through a distressed debt fund. Overnight, Damien unknowingly became indebted to the same man he had betrayed. Jordan smiled faintly when Eleanor brought him the final paperwork. "How far do you want to take this?" she asked. He took a deep breath, eyes cold. "All the way to the edge." Then one step further. He turned to the window again, watching the Dallas skyline gleam like a chessboard under sunlight. Every piece was in motion now, quietly, invisibly. And in that silence, Jordan Reeves stopped being a husband. He became the architect of ruin. The house felt warmer now, softer, a lie draped in tenderness. Clarissa believed the storm had passed. Jordan's sudden gentleness fooled her completely. He'd stopped asking questions. He came home early, brought flowers, cooked dinner, even listened when she talked about her personal growth. It was theater, and he played the role of loving husband so convincingly that even he might have believed it, if not for the quiet satisfaction that simmered behind every calm smile. Every morning, she kissed him goodbye before he drove to the office. And every morning, after her car disappeared down the street, Jordan checked his phone, Marcus Delgado feeding him updates in real time. Coal Maritime's balance sheet is bleeding, Marcus reported. He's losing capital but still thinks Clarissa's transfers are keeping him alive. Perfect, Jordan murmured. Let him think that. Behind the scenes, Jordan had already redirected those transfers through dummy accounts. Each dollar Clarissa thought she sent to Damien now circled back through Jordan's shell entities. She was unknowingly financing her own undoing. Weeks passed. Clarissa began smiling again, attending galas, even convincing herself that her husband's newfound calm came from emotional maturity, not strategy. One night, over wine, she touched his hand and said softly, "I know I haven't been easy. Thank you for forgiving me." Jordan looked up, studying her face. "Forgiveness," he said gently, "is the best investment a man can make." She laughed, unaware that those words weren't metaphorical. The next evening, Jordan hosted a small dinner party for investors, including Damien. It was their first public meeting since the betrayal, and Jordan greeted him like an old friend. Cameras flashed as they shook hands. "Business shouldn't be personal," Jordan said warmly for the reporters. "We're exploring new partnerships, fresh beginnings." Damien smiled, too wide, too smug. Clarissa watched from across the room, heart racing with pride. She thought she had orchestrated the reunion. In reality, Jordan had just staged Act 3 of her downfall. Over the following months, Reeves Link quietly absorbed smaller logistics firms, each one a silent weapon pointed at Coal Maritime. Contracts were rewritten, suppliers redirected, and Damien's clients began migrating, unaware that their new vendor was funded by the same man they'd betrayed. Clarissa, meanwhile, grew careless. Her arrogance returned. Her spending ballooned, her laughter a little louder. She had no idea that every designer bag, every secret investment, was being tracked by Eleanor and documented in a growing case file. Then came the day Jordan invited her to accompany him to a private gala at the Carter Grand Hotel. "It's a celebration of partnership," he said with a charming smile. "You should be there." Clarissa agreed instantly, glowing with pride, thinking her husband had not only forgiven her, but elevated her. She didn't know that every light in that ballroom would expose her lies. As Jordan adjusted his tie that evening, he glanced into the mirror and whispered, almost to himself, "Time to collect." The ballroom of the Carter Grand Hotel shimmered under 1,000 chandeliers, a sea of champagne and ambition. Dallas's elite filled the space, investors, CEOs, and journalists, all drawn to the evening's headline event, the partnership gala between Reeves Link Logistics and Coal Maritime Holdings. Clarissa stood beside Jordan, radiant in a gold silk gown, her arm looped through his. Every camera loved her smile. The power couple was back, or so the city thought. She glanced at her husband, noting how calm he seemed, how graciously he greeted Damien Cole across the room. To Clarissa, this was proof she'd tamed him. In truth, it was the quiet before annihilation. Damien approached, expensive suit gleaming, his arrogance barely contained. "Jordan," he said, extending his hand, "I appreciate the olive branch. This merger will be good for both of us." Jordan shook his hand firmly, eyes steady. "It already is," he replied. "I just wanted you both to see what you built together." The words slid through the air like a blade covered in silk. Clarissa frowned slightly, but kept smiling as they made their way to the stage. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. The master of ceremonies introduced Jordan as a visionary leader redefining the logistics landscape. Jordan stepped up to the microphone, his voice calm, measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate partnership, the joining of two companies, two visions, and in some cases," he paused, letting his eyes drift toward Clarissa and Damien, "two remarkable teachers." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. He smiled faintly. "See, I learned that trust can build empires, but I also learned that betrayal can build something far more valuable: wisdom. A murmur ran through the room. Clarissa's hand froze around her champagne glass. I want to thank the people who made this merger possible, Jordan continued smoothly. Clarissa Reeves and Damian Cole. Spotlights swiveled. The crowd turned toward them. For a second, Clarissa basked in the attention until the massive LED screen behind Jordan flickered to life. Transaction records appeared, then emails, then photos. Clarissa's face drained of color as her own messages filled the 40-foot display. Her words to Damian, her account transfers, her mocking laughter about how easy it was to increment. Fool Jordan. Gasps erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. Damian took a step forward, hissing under his breath. What the hell is this? Jordan didn't even look at him. Transparency, he said. Since we're merging, it's only right to show our shareholders where the funds came from. A roar of whispers filled the ballroom. Clarissa's hand trembled. Damian's jaw locked as the next slide revealed the legal statement. Cole Maritime Holdings, now a subsidiary of Reeves Link Logistics. Clarissa stared, lips parting in horror. You, Jordan turned to her, his tone polite, almost gentle. You built your lover's business with my money, Clarissa. I simply bought it back with interest. Then he walked off stage to thunderous murmurs and flashing cameras, leaving his wife and her lover frozen in the center of the light, trapped between exposure and silence. Outside the ballroom, Jordan adjusted his cufflinks, the faintest smile curling his lips. Phase 1 was complete. The Dallas County Courthouse was packed that morning, reporters, photographers, and spectators drawn by the same irresistible headline: Reeves v. Reeves. Billionaire. CEO sues wife for fraud and embezzlement. Clarissa Reeves walked into courtroom 12A in a cream suit that couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. Her once perfect poise now cracked under the flashes of cameras. Beside her sat Damian Cole, his arrogance gone, his jaw tight, sweat tracing his temple. Their lawyer, Clifford Vaughn, the city's most expensive defense attorney, leaned in, whispering strategies that sounded more desperate than confident. Across the aisle, Jordan Reeves sat with quiet authority. No theatrics, no emotion, just precision. He had come dressed like a man attending a business meeting, not a war. Beside him sat Eleanor Grant, her eyes cold and certain. Their attorney, a composed woman named Adele Knox, rose as the judge entered. Your Honor, Adele began, we will prove that Mrs. Reeves not only committed marital infidelity, but orchestrated a large-scale financial fraud. She funneled corporate funds into her lover's failing company under false vendor accounts. We will show that every dollar originated from Mr. Reeves's business and that she acted with intent to conceal. Clifford scoffed. Your Honor, my client merely managed shared investments. Mr. Reeves is attempting to weaponize divorce law to punish a personal betrayal. Judge Monroe raised a brow. Then this should be interesting. Proceed. The prosecution's first exhibit hit like a hammer, the emails. Line by line, the courtroom read Clarissa's messages to Damian, mocking Jordan's naivety, outlining their plans to merge funds before the next audit. Gasps echoed. The judge's expression hardened. Then came Eleanor's testimony. Calm, factual, devastating. Every transfer originated from a Reeves Link joint account, she said, handing over documents. Mrs. Reeves authorized them using Mr. Reeves's signature stamp, one reserved strictly for board-level approvals. Clarissa shifted in her seat, whispering frantically to her lawyer. Vaughn objected repeatedly, but each objection died under the weight of evidence. Then Adele called Marcus Delgado to the stand. Mr. Delgado, did your investigation include paternity testing at Mr. Reeves's request? Yes, ma'am. And your findings? Marcus hesitated, glancing toward Jordan, who gave a silent nod. Both children are biologically fathered by Mr. Damian Cole. The air vanished from the room. Clarissa's breath caught audibly. Damian's head dropped into his hands. Cameras clicked furiously as the judge struck her gavel. Order! But there was no order left to salvage. By the time Adele rested her case, Clarissa was visibly trembling. Vaughn's defense collapsed under the sheer precision of Jordan's preparation. Every document, every witness, every account had been perfectly timed not to win, but to destroy. Judge Monroe's verdict came after only 1 hour of deliberation. Given the overwhelming evidence of fraud, perjury, and misconduct, the court hereby grants full asset control and sole custody of the children to Mr. Reeves. Mrs. Reeves and Mr. Cole are to face federal investigation for financial crimes. Clarissa's sobs echoed faintly as the gavel fell. Damien stared blankly ahead, realizing that everything he owned, including the company he stole now, belonged to the man he betrayed. Jordan stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked at Clarissa one last time. "You said you built his business with my money," he said softly. "Now you'll both learn what it means to live without it." And with that, he walked out, leaving them drowning in the silence of their own ruin. The week after the verdict, Dallas could talk about nothing else. Every newspaper headline screamed the same story in new words. Wife built lover's company, with husband's money loses everything in court. The scandal spread like wildfire across financial networks, legal forums, and social media. Clarissa Reeves, once the face of elegance, became a cautionary tale about greed, betrayal, and arrogance. Damien's empire crumbled overnight. Banks froze his accounts. Investors pulled out. His company's board, now majority owned by ReevesLink, voted to dissolve operations. Every employee received notice from Jordan's restructuring office signed by Eleanor Grant. Damien stormed into ReevesLink headquarters that Friday, demanding to see Jordan. Security stopped him at the entrance. "Tell him I'm not leaving until I speak to him," he shouted. Moments later, Jordan himself stepped out of the elevator, calm, composed, immaculately dressed. "Damien," he greeted, his voice level. "I thought you'd be too busy filing bankruptcy." "You ruined me," Damien hissed. Jordan's gaze didn't waver. "You did that the moment you mistook my silence for weakness." He turned and walked away as Damien's voice cracked behind him, shouting curses no one cared to hear. Cameras caught the moment. It went viral within hours. Headline: Disgraced CEO confronts Jordan Reeves outside his own former company. Across town, Clarissa's world had shrunk to a one-bedroom apartment she could barely afford. The penthouse was gone. The cars were gone. Her designer jewelry repossessed to cover legal fees. Even the socialites who once begged for her presence now crossed the street to avoid her. One evening, rain pouring outside, she stood outside the courthouse steps, clutching a thin coat around her. When she saw Jordan walking down the stairs, her knees weakened. She ran toward him. "Jordan, please," she cried. "Don't take the children. They're all I have left." He paused, the rain soaking into his suit. His face was unreadable. "They're the only innocent part of all this, Clarissa. That's why they'll stay with me where they're safe." "Safe?" she repeated bitterly. "You think this is justice?" Jordan's voice lowered. "No, justice is what comes after truth. You gave me both." She stared at him, broken, desperate. "I loved you once." He met her eyes, and for the briefest moment, the coldness melted, replaced by something softer, almost mournful. "And I believed you once. That was my mistake." A flash of lightning illuminated the courthouse steps as he turned and walked away, leaving her in the rain. The cameras caught her collapse, a once-adored wife kneeling on the same stone steps where her lies had unraveled. The video went viral in under an hour. Back at his penthouse, Jordan watched the clip in silence. The city lights flickered across the glass, reflecting both victory and loss. Revenge had ended, but peace hadn't yet arrived. He raised a glass of whiskey to the skyline. "For every lie," he whispered, "there's an invoice, and mine was just paid in full." Months passed. Dallas moved on to new scandals, new headlines. But for Jordan Reeves, the silence that followed victory was louder than any applause. The court battles were over. ReevesLink thrived under his control. Investors called him a genius, the man who turned betrayal into leverage. But when he came home at night, the penthouse felt larger, emptier, quieter. One Sunday afternoon, he sat in his study, staring at two framed drawings on the wall, a crayon rocket ship, and a stick figure family with the words, "Daddy's the best." The colors had faded, but the innocence hadn't. Ava and Mason still called him Dad, even after learning the truth. They didn't understand DNA reports or custody hearings. They only knew the man who tucked them in every night. And that, more than any verdict, was his victory. Eleanor stopped by that evening. "You look tired," she said softly, placing a folder on his desk. "Final paperwork on the liquidation. Damien's officially finished." Jordan nodded. "And Clarissa? Filed for bankruptcy. She's working part-time at a design firm in Austin." He looked down, absorbing that quietly. "Good. Maybe she'll find herself there." Eleanor hesitated. "Do you regret it?" He smiled faintly, eyes still on the skyline. "No, but I wish it hadn't been necessary." After she left, Jordan stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched endlessly before him, glass, steel, and motion. Somewhere in that sprawl, Clarissa lived a smaller life now, stripped of pretense. Damien had disappeared entirely, swallowed by his own debts. Justice had been served, but justice, he'd learned, doesn't heal, it balances. He thought of that morning months ago, her standing in their kitchen, confessing with pride that she'd used his money to build another man's dream. How calm he'd been, how it had all started with silence. Maybe that's why his revenge had worked, because silence, wielded properly, is deadlier than rage. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his gallery. A photo caught his eye, Clarissa, holding their children at a picnic years ago, laughing beneath a tree. For a second, he saw not the betrayer, but the woman he'd once loved. The memory hurt less now, though the scar remained. He set the phone down and whispered into the night, "You taught me what trust costs." Then he turned off the lights, leaving only the city's reflection on the glass. The camera of life, if it were watching, would slowly pull back from that balcony, one man, framed against a skyline built on both triumph and loss. Because in the end, Jordan Reeves didn't just win his case. He proved that betrayal may destroy love, but it can never destroy truth. And that sometimes the kindest men make the most dangerous enemies.